Hello students, I am Dr. L.K. Das, Assistant Professor of Sociology at the Department of HSS IIT Roorkee. Welcome to another lecture of the NPTEL course Power and Politics in Contemporary India, a Sociological View. In today's lecture, we'll discuss about visual politics. The reason it is called visual politics is because everywhere we see, we have a certain idea of what we are seeing. Even if visually we cannot see, still the way something is interpreted, we try to look at it from a visual point of view. So that is the reason why in today's lecture we'll examine how visualization has become a part of politics in terms of images, symbols, posters and performances. So what does it mean? When we associate politics with sociology, with society, and what we are able to see, that means we are also speaking about public perception and political meaning. Because within the dimension of society, nothing is done or nothing happens without a reason. Now, when I say without a reason, that means there are certain ideas, and these ideas are floating around us. Now, some of these ideas, if we say that they are floating around us, that means are they floating freely or they are floating in a particular context. And as we have been discussing over the past 10 weeks, nothing happens in a society if it is not ideated, or no idea in society floats without any reason. There is a certain reason because of which somebody is propagating a particular idea. There is a reason because of which somebody subscribes to a particular idea. So in modern democracies, political ideas circulate not only through text but through powerful visual cues that influence legitimacy. So when I use the word legitimacy, we have to go back to the way Max Weber has described it, the way Althusser has described it, the way Gramsci has described it, which essentially means that legitimacy is not natural. It does not come just because somebody is powerful, just because somebody is holding a particular power. It has its own context, and for the process of legitimacy, and the entire institute of legitimacy has to be constantly reproduced. And one of the very fundamental ways through which this reproduction happens is through vision, what we see. And what we see is what we believe in. And this is where, as we have discussed before, framing works. As I had said before, this could be a part of framing. And when we say framing, this is what the visualizer would want you to see. Somebody would want you to see only the face. Somebody would want you to see only the legs. Or somebody would want you to see the entire body. This way, visions are very significant. Without visions, many a times it is difficult for the politicians, or for to be politicians, or many people in general, to communicate. Now, visual politics is also about what we had discussed previously about Habermas's idea of a rational public sphere. That means public sphere, as we had discussed, is a place, is a space where civil society comes together, discusses, debates, challenges what is happening in the society as well as what is happening around them, and what the state is doing. So understanding visual politics is essential for grasping contemporary political culture. Now, media representation and political culture is, or media and the way media represents something is never neutral. Why? Because media is owned by somebody, and the ownership pattern deals with how something is being created, whether it is being created as legitimate, as urgent, or as real in political life. Why do you think that most of the politicians in India, even if they are crorepati's, try to project themselves as social workers? Why do you think, except a few politicians, or except a few bureaucrats, or except a few businessmen or entrepreneurs, most of the time these people try to present themselves as social workers? Even if somebody is a billionaire, they try to project they're doing the work they're doing it for social work, for social service. So this is a way through which media representation happens. And media representation here is significant because it provides a visual logic. A visual logic that speaks about institutions, that speaks about civic attitudes, that speaks about how participation is being modulated. So in another way, we can understand this as what are symbols, imagery, and performances for. The moment I say India, I say Bharat, what kind of an imagination that comes to your mind? It could be highly contextual. It could be the map of India. Now the map of India, the way it looks like, is it exactly the same, or there are certain variations? Or the moment I say India, the first thing that comes to your mind is our tricolor, or something else. And so this is a frame of reference. This is a symbol which ideates, which gives an idea of what is the idea of India, how it is being represented. So modern media, the way it functions, whether it is owned by the state or it is owned by private enterprises, are never neutral. Rather, their job now is to provide a certain political meaning. They take stands. So in the context of the India, you take up any newspaper. What is the Hindu identified as? What is the Times of India identified as? What is the Indian Express identified as? What is the nature of Dainik Jagran or Dainik Bhaskar or many of this kind of newspapers? Similarly, if you look at news channels, what kind of news they are providing? What is the ownership pattern? What kind of colors are they using, and why are they using particular colors? As we'll discuss in a moment, colors also matter very significantly, because most of the people identify something with colors. And as a matter of fact, we have elections in India, and most often than not, candidates are identified by the party's symbol rather than their names, or rather than the name of the political party. So modern media, what it also does is that it creates a certain kind of political culture. Look at the language, look at the tone at which our news anchors speak. When they speak to power, or when they speak to somebody in the opposition, when they speak to students, or when they have to speak to somebody who is rich and powerful. So media representation is also a form of political meaning, and these forms of political meanings never create passive intermediaries. Rather, they are actively participating in the creation of representation, in the creation of political culture. Now, one of the smartest ways through which, or one of the earliest periods from where this visualization, the representation of certain kind of visuals was created at a mass scale was in the post-Bolshevik revolution period, in which the symbols of workers, symbols of development, some particular cultures, particular colors were shown in a particular light. So, for example, red and black, they created within the Soviet literature, particularly visual literature, certain kind of instantly recognizable moral political binaries, and this was done for the mass audiences. And why was it done? When Bolshevik revolution happened in 1917, most of the people in Soviet or in Soviet Russia lived in villages, were illiterate. So because they could not read and write, so symbols, figures, photographs, paintings, and particular certain idea of color became very significant. Posters were created to be what scholars call as visual shorthand. So one of the visual shorthand is the iconic blacksmith worker, who is both a proletariat as well as a revolutionary, which means that the blacksmith, who is a worker, has power, has control over not only his body or her body, but also now this person is able to challenge anybody and everybody who would like to suppress him or her. And the moment I say him and her, I'm not being politically correct here, because most of the iconography that was created in the post-Bolshevik revolution period, we see both men and women or a man and a woman coming together to create, to struggle, to fight, and to show to the population, to the other masses, not only in their own country but also outside, that when men and women come together, when men and women from working class come together, they can change the world. And that is why socialist mobilization used a lot of artistic motives in order to proclaim the idea that the proletariats have arrived. If you ever get a chance to visit to places like Berlin, to places like Eastern Europe, and also of course Russia, go and check out some of the factory areas. Go and check out some of the central areas. What kind of imagery that they have created, what kind of embellishments that have been done, and what kind of artistic motives are there to represent certain ideas. One of the artistic motives is the creation of Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, who are forever ready to march. They play games, they move around, they are good at studies, they are patriotic, and they are always ready to sacrifice themselves for the motherland or the fatherland, whichever the country it is. The red color symbolized not only the masses, but also red color symbolizes blood. So it also symbolizes for them creativity, it also symbolizes for them what could be done. Whereas black, it's a morally positioned action or political language in which black is negative, red is positive. Everybody else who is not the followers of the red are colored in black, which in a way needs to be negated. Gandhian symbolism in the Indian context is also very significant in the way Mahatma Gandhi uses symbols. Symbols like Khadi, fasting, cow, Harijan, so on and so forth. So for him, these were not abstract metaphors. The very reason a tuxedo the wearing Gandhi converted to a loincloth or dhoti wearing Mahatma Gandhi, it was a symbolic representation of poverty, truth, chastity, and fortitude. In other words, Mahatma Gandhi chose to adore a certain kind of dress. It's not that he could not afford better dresses, rather, because in the Indian context, most of the people were living in rural areas, and these villagers were using hand spun khadi kurta or dhoti. Only the rich could afford to have a kurta. Most other people would just have a loincloth. So, by being the leader of to be the leader of this country during the period of the colonized India, the most famous man wanted to create his body as a symbol. So, the same thing he did with the idea of fasting. Fasting in any culture, whether it is Hindus, whether it is Muslims, Christians, or anybody for that matter, has a highly religious and spiritual meaning. Fasting is about cleaning your own body of toxicants. Fasting is also about showing restraint. Fasting is also about creating certain sense of symbolism through which you want to connect to somebody who is not listening to you, or you are trying to convey a particular kind of message. So here, when you are talking about praxeology, in which everything has to be, every symbol has a meaning, and this meaning has to be practiced. So Gandhi kept on fasting for one reason or the other, and the most famous fasting that he did was when Ambedkar demanded a separate electorate for the minorities, particularly for the Dalit minorities. And that is when the Pune Pact happened. So Gandhi's idea of fasting, khadi, or cow, or even symbolizing the ex-untouchables as Harijans is highly significant, because through that he is positioning himself as the champion of truth, chastity, and fortitude. It was also the same when you're talking about spinning and boycotting, spinning one's own cloth and boycotting foreign produced goods. Everything has a symbol which needs to be practiced. So posters now are also part of political communication, because these are all visual imaging. So posters enable message repetition in shared environments, reinforcing ideological cues. Now most of you are either students or you're preparing for some competitive examinations. So if you're preparing for certain competitive examinations, do you realize or have you seen around how many of these coaching institutions, they create posters after every result of whether it is SSP, whether it is NDA, whether it is UPSC, or some other kind of examinations in which lakhs and lakhs of students participate. How are these posters created? What is the meaning of these posters? Who is shown in what attire? Whose names become bigger? Whose names are smaller? And in what way the size of them matter? So politics in terms of poster making is also a politics of representation. A certain identity of representation in which we are creating a certain form of historical memory and identity. Why do you think while Mahatma Gandhi wore khadi, handspun dhoti, Ambedkar on the other hand never used those kind of dresses? He was always impeccably dressed. Why is that so? It's a question that I think I would suggest that you look at, try to understand, and we'll see. There's a possibility that I might ask you this question in your the final examination. But irrespective of the examination, look at it, read a little bit about it, and you understand what is the meaning of these posters and what is the meaning of these symbolisms. The next topic we are going to discuss is that of print capitalism that we have been discussing since quite some time, iconography and Indian political visuality. I would have loved to have the different kind of photographs, different kind of paintings here, but as we are going to upload all these lectures on YouTube, and I do not have copyright over those materials, so I cannot present it. But imagine all the calendars that you have at home, and all the calendars in which or on which you see the images of gods and goddesses, whether it is Lakshmi, whether it is Saraswati. Lakshmi, the standing on a lotus with her multiple arms. She is the holding something, the elephants around her, and she is giving Ashirvad. And through this Ashirvad, golden coins are falling on a jar. Now, this is a very significant way through which Lakshmi has been represented. If you dig a little deeper, you'll realize that it was done by none other than Raja Ravi Verma. And Raja Ravi Verma from Kerala created this kind of icons, created this kind of visual images, and printed them on chart papers, printed them on calendars, printed them for books, and circulated them at the cheapest possible cost. Because of which, now it's almost a century, we still find his paintings throughout the country. And this has created a sense of visual history. What does Lakshmi represent? Lakshmi represents opulence. Lakshmi represents wealth. Lakshmi represents that if you're good enough, if you work hard enough, then she will be yours. But if you do not do, then she will move away. She is also representative of purity. Now, money is considered to be sin, but Lakshmi is considered to be pure. Somewhere she is shown the giving away gold coins. Somewhere she is shown to holding the freshly cut the paddy or freshly cut wheat or something that is in between. So this way, what print capitalism of Raja Ravi Verma and others did was that it created a visual imagery of our imagination. And this imagination created something like newspapers, because newspapers are associated with print capitalism, and with this print capitalism, both in English as well as vernacular language, it became the symbolic of what can be spoken and what cannot be spoken. And because it started during the colonial period, and there was a lot of censorship, so images became a way to represent. Think of the image of Bharat Mata. What does Bharat Mata symbolize? And who created the first image of Bharat Mata? And how was she created? And how the shift has happened of Bharat Mata over the past several decades. Same thing, look at the way Sri Ram is represented. How was he represented by Raja Ravi Verma almost a century back, and how he is being represented now? Look at any of these gods and goddesses. How are they done? So newspapers, as part of print capitalism, also created the different sort of ideas about what icons are there and how visuals can be used for political purposes. Another kind of visualization is performances. So, for example, Ramayana and Mahabharata, when they were projected on TV screens during the 1980s, the very interesting part is that people started identifying these actors and actresses as real gods and goddesses. So the actor who played Ram in Durdarshan's Ramayan symbolized Ram. Same was with Sita, Lakshman, and everyone else. So this way, a certain form of mythological imagery was used for political purposes to tell people that, see, this is how the Ram lived, this is how Ram looked like, and this is Ayodhya, these are the people of Ayodhya, this is the journey that he took with his brother and his wife throughout this land and connected north with south, connected east with west, and connected different castes, jatis, and gotras in one unit. And as a matter of fact, even after decades since this kind of serials were podcasted or telecasted, we still find people relying and believing that this is the ideal way through which Ramayana should have been projected. So one of the interesting ways is that sometimes some of these performances blurred boundaries between religious spectacle and political activism, because the one who was Ram then in a TV serial is now the member of parliament. So what, as I said before, what is being projected is not innocent. In political sociology, we do not take anything as natural, as granted. Rather, our job is to look at how public sphere, whether it was of Habermas in public sphere or that of any other Indian scholar, is being redefined on a daily basis, and it is being redefined by the uses of imagery, by the uses of performances in the vision of imagery, and how it is being used again and again and again. And this is not just about religions or countries using it. Social movements use it very frequently. If you ever get a chance to visit, I'll suggest that you visit the campus of JNU in New Delhi and look at its wall paintings. Its wall paintings tell you a specific story, or it tells you multiple stories of what is possible, how an idea can be communicated, how words need to be communicated, what are the verbal and non-verbal ways through which visual activism works. And this is not just about left student associations doing it or right students associations doing it. Everybody there is forced to do it, compelled to do it. Why? Because elections in JNU or student body elections in JNU cost you nothing. You cannot take printouts. So you have to be creative to visualize and to represent those visions and visuals. So social movements also rely very heavily by creating highly emotional and thought-provoking images. So for example, the Narmada Bachao Andolan would show the river Narmada in red color because it is red with the blood of the Adivasis. Nirbhaya protests that amplified digital activism and online and offline political participation, because what started online got spread through offline means, and what was done offline also the induced digital activism. So visuals became reference points for supporters and detractors alike in meaning-making processes. So on the one hand, you have protesters, they're creating visual imagery, and on the other hand, the counter-protesters are doing it. In the present era, particularly in digital activism, you see political memes, and how political memes are used and utilized in order to gain support or in order to counter somebody's points. Television, as I said, has created this persona of image bites, as well as of how certain kind of images are played again and again over time to gain sympathy, to point out a certain idea, or to influence certain kind of perceptions. And these certain kind of perceptions are significant for us to study because it is happening real time. It is happening right in front of us. Digital media, the, with its diversity as well as with its very less degree of the gatekeeping, is able to present a diversity of images for us. Now, you'd be watching these videos on YouTube, and you now, because you'd be watching on this YouTube, as YouTube videos, look at the thumbnails. How these thumbnails, the color presentation there, the size of the images, how they are written, in what way somebody is standing, in what way somebody is showing something. So the personification of these imageries and these images is highly significant, because what you're doing is that you're also performing something. You're performing a meaning making process. You're participating in a meaning making process. And whether these are relatable with everyday life, because power works on everydayness rather than at certain institutions. And some of these institutions are part of that. So in a way, political memes, as I said, are used and abused in order to create certain narratives. And these narratives are politically managed narratives. These are the ways through which ideas are constructed. These are the ways through which images are constructed or destroyed. So visibility is part and parcel of political ideations and visualizations. So in a way, one of the biggest contemporary challenge is that visual media has intensified the battle between the ones who are able to access it through a rational challenge, the rational critical channel, and the ones who are trusting it without this rational critical ideals. So when you watch media, watch it from the lens of a political sociologist rather than that of just a consumer of visions or visuals. So there are a few questions that I have, in which how can we critically analyze visual content in polarized public spheres? Or how do performances like Yatras produce political beginning or political belonging? So look at it and think for yourself. So these are a few references that I have. Thank you.